Okay, so I think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله ولأعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So this is the 22nd session of our series, The Art of Supplication, which is an ongoing exploration into the sacred relationship between the supplicant, the supplication, and the divine. Now, as I say at the beginning of every session, these insights, the insights within these series are cumulative, and the nature of our discussion requires that each part build upon the foundations that were laid in the ones that came before. Therefore, to prevent any misunderstanding and to truly fully benefit from the depth of this subject, it's essential that everyone engage with the previous parts, ideally in order, before continuing with this one. Nevertheless, as we have every week, we have a recap of last week's session, which was actually the first part of a sort of a series within a series titled The Heart of the Matter, and the core subject was the prerequisites of purity, Tazkiyah, and Tahara. So if I can get a salawat, we can move for the recap.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على
وآل
محمد
محمد.
وآل محمد وعجل الفرج.
So in the first part of this new sub-series titled The Heart of the Matter, we laid the foundational prayer before the prayer concept. We established that before we can even ask, we must first be in a state of purity. Our journey unfolded in three distinct movements. The first one, from Tahara to Tazkiyah, the garment and the self. We began with the Quranic imperative for success, Tazkiyah, the purification of the self, as we learned from Surah Al-Shams, the chapter of the sun. We connected this to the command to purify your garments in Surah Al-Muddathir, the chapter of the cloaked one. Following Allama Tabatabai, we understood that garments are not just a reference to physical clothes, but as our external conduct and our inner souls, in our nafs. The lesson was to elevate wudu from a robotic habit to a conscious etiquette, intending, as Imam Khomeini guided us, to wash our senses of all other than God. And our call to clarify was to reject and expose the superficial purity of the modern age, from corporate greenwashing to the whitewashing of genocide, to challenge the Khawarej, or the extremist, literalist mindset that obsesses over external piety while ignoring the damage and the najasa, or the impurities of the heart. We contrasted this with the 95% spiritual work of the resistance, which proves that the true tahara is the purification of intent. Second point was from body to heart, the qalb tahir, the pure heart. We then shattered the comfort of ritualism with the stark hadith of Imam al-Sadiq. No purification is accepted without a pure heart. This established that the heart validates the limbs, not the other way around. Our lesson: to perform an internal wudu, an internal ablution against the spiritual filth of envy, of arrogance, and so much more. And we took teachings from Ayatullah Fadhlullah. We specifically took his practical cure for envy, to force ourselves to make dua or to supplicate for a person that we envy. Our call to clarify was to transform our communities from a state of takfir, that is, of condemning and insulting others, to one of istighfar, seeking forgiveness for oneself, understanding that this is the internal state that separates a true mujahid, a true resistance warrior, from a mere fighter. And the third point, from humility to nothingness, khushu and faq. Finally, we define the state of the pure heart as khushu, or humility, the key to prayer, from Imam Ali. and the heart's prostration as taught by Ayatollah Fadhlullah. We then dug into its root cause, the intellectual and spiritual realization of our faqr or ontological poverty before God, as described in Surah al-Fatir. Following Mullah Sadra, we define this as our very existence being a linking one, what we call al-wujud al-rabit, a mere ray of his light. Our lesson, to wage a relentless war on ujub, on self-admiration, using the tools given to us by Ayatollah Misbayazdi, remembering that every perfection we possess is in fact borrowed and from him. And our call to clarify, to identify the satanic arrogance of the modern world, the I am better, as the true engine of all oppression. We link this to Surah al-Asr, continue the chapter of the time, concluding that only the one who has realized their faqr or their ontological poverty can possess this true sabr or steadfastness or resistance required to enjoin truth as per the surah. We concluded with a practical summary and our first supplication for this short mini-series, setting the stage for our next session, which is this one. In his most beautiful name, we proceed. If I can get a loud salawat, we can move to the main section, which is the part 2 of the heart of the matter, the axis of supplication or yaqeen.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على
وآل
محمد
محمد.
وآل محمد وعجل.
So as we said in the first part of our series, we laid the essential foundation for our journey to God. We explored the prerequisites of purity, learning that the path begins with Tazkiyah, the purification of our inner self and our outer conduct. We learned from Imam al-Sadiq that this outer purification is only accepted by way of a pure heart, one cleansed of the spiritual filth of envy, malice, arrogance, and such vices. This journey culminated in a state of khushu' or humility, the heart's prostration, which we found was the natural, effortless result of our realizing our own faqr or ontological poverty. We discovered through the wisdom of Mullah Sadra that we are not beings who need God, but beings whose very existence is our need for him, a linking existence, as it's called by Mullah Sadra, al-wujud al-rabat, a mere ray of his light. We have in essence prepared the vessel. We have purified the mirror of the heart from the rust of sin and the dust of heedlessness. Now we must ask, what is the substance that fills this vessel? What is the light that this mirror is supposed to reflect? If purity and humility are the clean, fertile soil, then our subject today, yaqeen or certainty, is the mihwar or the axis of the entire plant. It is the unshakable spiritual backbone that connects the root of our poverty or faqr in this dark earth to the sun of God's absolute mercy and truth. So if I can get a salawat, we move on to the 4 pillars of certainty, the intellectual foundation.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل
محمد.
محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So the core concept, what is yaqeen? We begin by establishing a critical distinction. In the contemporary world, certainty is often confused with a blind, rigid, or inherited dogma. It is seen as the opposite of intellect. But in the Gnostic and intellectual tradition of the Ahlulbayt, true yaqeen or certainty is not the enemy of the intellect. It is in fact the highest achievement of the intellect, a profound spiritual and intellectual attainment. The Quran itself introduces yaqeen as the defining characteristic of those who are God-conscious, al-muttaqeen. At the very beginning of Surah al-Baqarah, in Quran, in Surah al-Baqarah, the chapter of the cow, second chapter of the Quran, verse 4, God says, and of the hereafter they are certain. Now in Tafsir al-Mizan, Allama Tabatabai explains, Tafsir al-Mizan being an exegesis, a tafsir of Quran, explains that the Quran's specific use of the word yaqeen or certainty here rather than just the word iman or faith, signifies higher station. Allama goes on to define yaqeen with great precision. He says, and yaqeen is the firm belief which no doubt can penetrate. And like with all of these sessions, the references are on the write-up. I encourage everyone to review them. Yaqeen is a form of seeing reality, not just believing in it. This certainty in the akhirah, or in the hereafter, is what reorientates the believer's entire life. If yaqeen or certainty is the goal, how do we build this unshakable structure? The commander of the faithful, Imam Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, provides the complete blueprint when asked about faith. He explained that yaqeen or certainty itself stands on 4 pillars. Imam Ali says, certainty or yaqeen rests on 4 pillars: insightful discernment, the interpretation of wisdom, admonition before reflection, and the established way of those who came before. And the references all in the write-up. This is actually revolutionary framing. It tells us that yaqeen is not a passive state. Rather, it is an active process, the fruit of sustained work. So let's have a look at these 4 points, and then we'll go into them in more detail. First of all, insightful discernment. To see with fitna. Now, I need to make a caveat over here. The word fitna, when we hear it normally, means trial or tribulation or something negative. The word that is with the ta in Arabic. This is with the ta in Arabic, and it's fitna, which means insightful discernment. And this is the word used by Imam Ali. It is a keen, penetrating acuity that looks beyond the surface. Secondly, you have the interpretation of wisdom, not merely to read wisdom or hikmah, but to practice what we call ta'wil, which is interpretation, to return wisdom to its ultimate meaning and grasp its deepest implications. Number 3, admonition born of reflection, to treat the events of the world, ibra we call it, as a living sermon or a maw'atha, to recognize the signs on the horizon and within ourselves. And the 4th point, the established way of those who came before, to root our practice in the sunnah, the proven path of the prophets and the imams who embodied yaqeen or certainty. Yaqeen, therefore, is the only possible outcome for a heart that is both pure, as we discussed in our previous session, and intellectually sincere. So let's now have a look at the lessons for the present, the inward lesson from knowledge to practice. The practical lesson from Imam Ali's definition is profound. We are commanded to build our certainty. We must graduate from a faith of inheritance, what we call Iman al-Waritha, a faith we simply hold because our parents did, to a faith of investigation, Iman al-Diraya. We cannot hope to have that yaqeen or certainty of Imam Ali if we are not willing to do the work of Imam Ali. This work forms a spiritual curriculum. However, a crucial caveat must be made over here. This journey of deep study, especially into the ocean of Quranic tafsir and hadith and philosophy and even mysticism, must be undertaken with great humility. It is absolutely essential to be connected to a righteous and learned scholar, what we call alim rabbani. This does not mean one cannot read independently, but it means having access to a guide who can clarify misunderstandings, who can dispel confusions, and can prevent the dark pathways of misinterpretation. We must approach this study by saying to our guide, I am studying this topic. May I come to you for guidance and clarification. This connection is the safeguard for our sincerity. Our spiritual curriculum is to actively engage these 4 pillars. Pillar number 1, insightful discernment. This is a call for deep study. We must dedicate real, scheduled time to learning our faith. This is not a casual pursuit, but a pursuit of perfection itself. Imam al-Baqir, the fifth Imam, has stated, perfection, all of perfection, is to gain deep understanding in the religion. Tafaqquh fi ad-din. And the reference, of course, is in the write-up. This means engaging in a deep study of the Quran with reliable tafsir or exegesis, like al-Mizan or Tafsir Tasneem and so on, and studying the foundational hadith of Ahlulbayt from sources like Al-Kafi, Bihr al-Anwar, etc., etc. But again, and I can't emphasize this enough, not just randomly. Have a real scholar available who can guide you and prevent you from becoming misguided. The second pillar, the interpretation of wisdom. This is a call to think. We must stop being passive receivers of information and start connecting the concepts. This act of reflection, tafakkur, is the engine of insight, a form of worship in its own right, as famously narrated by from the Prophet Muhammad and from Ahlulbayt, where Prophet Muhammad is noted to have said, 1 hour of reflection is better than 70 years of worship. This is the tafakkur where we ask why. This is the deep reflection where we ask why. Why does the Quran link salah or prayer and zakat, purifying alms? How does purity connect to justice in this world? This process of deep interpretation and introspection and reflection, of tracing a concept back to its divine source, is the very interpretation or ta'awwul that Imam Ali spoke of in the hadith we quoted earlier. It is this interpretive work that builds a robust, unshakable worldview, one that is ours through active, guided investigation, and I repeat, guided. Make sure you have a sincere scholar who is available to you. This is then not a worldview that is merely inherited or passively accepted. Pillar number 3, admonition born of reflection. This is a call to meditate on the signs of God. We must observe the world, the fall of an oppressor, the resilience of a blade of grass, the precision of the entire cosmos, and see in them sermons from God. Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, identified this as the key to unlocking irfan or gnosis. Imam Khomeini said in his 40 hadith, the references are all in the write-up, he said, and know that tafakkur or reflection is the key to the doors of ma'rifah or irfan or gnosis, and the treasures of perfection and knowledge, and its subject is to reflect upon the signs on the horizon and within yourselves, as noted in Quran in Surah al-Fussilat, the chapter of the clearly explained, 41st chapter of the Quran, verse number 53. This is how we take a lesson, an ibrah, that points directly to His power, His wisdom, and His mercy. And the fourth pillar, the established way of those who came before. This is a call to anchor ourselves in sacred history. When our own yaqeen, our own certainty wavers, we look to the yaqeen or certainty of the ones who came before, the established way of the prophets of God, especially Prophet Muhammad and the Ahlulbayt. We study their lives to gain a fraction of the certainty that led Imam Ali to his famous declaration where he said, even if the veil covering the unseen were to be lifted, it would not increase my certainty. We must study the life of Imam Hussein in Karbala, or Imam Khomeini in his exile, or the resistance in Gaza, or the resistance in Lebanon, in Yemen, all of these things, where impossible odds were faced with this same serene and absolute certainty in the divine promise. Their yaqeen, their certainty, then becomes our fuel. Now let's look at our call to clarify, the outward call, from practice to proclamation. Now, a society that lacks yaqeen or certainty is a society that runs on doubt. It is a culture of perpetual anxiety, random trends, and mass-produced propaganda. The modern world, through its 24-hour news cycles and relentless marketing, manufactures a state of doubt and inadequacy. Doubt in truth, doubt in ourselves, doubt in God. Why? In order to sell us products and ideologies. Into this chaos, the takfiri mindset, which we discussed and critiqued in our previous session, offers a false solution, a certainty that is not yaqeen, but rather is a rigid and brittle and fearful dogma. It is the certainty of the Khawarej. It is a certainty so weak that it fears questions, it fears the intellect, and must shout to convince itself of its own truth. It is not built on insightful discernment. Our call to clarify is to reject this false dichotomy. We must clarify that true yaqeen, true certainty of the Ahlulbayt is the very opposite. It is not brittle, it is robust. It is not fearful, it is confident. A community built on the 4 pillars of Imam Ali welcomes intellectual engagement, thrives on the interpretation of wisdom, and produces scholars, philosophers, and Gnostics, not just slogan-shouting zealots. This intellectually grounded yaqeen or certainty is the first step to inoculating our communities and ourselves against both the propaganda of the materialist West and the dogma of the literalist extremists. It is the foundation of a faith that cannot be shaken. Please give me a salawat and we move to the second point, which is the state of certainty, from request to witness.
اللهم صل
اللهم صل
على
على
محمد
محمد
وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So firstly, the core concept. What does yaqeen, what does certainty feel like? If our first point was the intellectual blueprint for yaqeen, for certainty, the 4 pillars that form its structure, our second point is the experience of it. What does it feel like to inhabit this state? What is the tangible spiritual quality of a heart that possesses yaqeen or certainty? First, we must understand its station. Yaqeen or certainty is not merely an optional upgrade to faith. It is its very perfection. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him, defines it with the ultimate clarity. Imam al-Sadiq tells us, teaches us, certainty is faith in its entirety. And like with all the references, you can find them in the write-up, and I strongly encourage everyone to review them. This statement, certainty is faith in its entirety, this is truly a staggering statement. It implies that anything less than certainty or yaqeen results in an incomplete faith. This is the goal that we are striving for. But how does this state manifest? Imam Khomeini, in his Irfani or Gnostic writings, describes it not as a thought, but as a form of vision. He explains that it is the direct fruit of purifying the heart, as we learned previously in our previous session, and then filling it with remembrance or dhikr. He writes, again, in his 40 hadith, and the reference, of course, is in the write-up, he says, Imam Khomeini says, therefore, after the human interior finds purity, little by little, the unseen realities of the spiritual kingdom, what we call alam malakut, are reflected in it, and yaqeen or certainty is obtained, and the realities reach the station of vision. This is the rabbit hole. Yaqeen is the state where the unseen becomes manifest. The heart, once polished, becomes a mirror that reflects the realities of the unseen spiritual world or kingdom. As Imam Khomeini explains, this light of faith can become brighter than any physical light. He says, again in 40 hadith, references are in the write-up. Imam Khomeini says, in this station, the realities of Tawheed, monotheism, the unity of God, are unveiled to his heart. It may be that it becomes brighter than the light of the sun in the middle of the day. The late great scholar, Ayatullah Fadhlullah, may God rest his pure soul, provides the final beautiful synthesis of what this state does to our prayer. If the unseen is now seen, and the heart is in a state of reflection, our relationship with God is fundamentally altered. In Ayatullah Fadhlullah's commentary on supplication, specifically Du'a Kumail, the supplication of Kumail, he explains this transformation, saying, indeed, certainty or yaqeen transforms supplication or du'a from a request, what we call a talab, into a conversation, what we call a hadath. This is the ultimate transformation. The prayer is no longer a desperate plea to a distant or absent God. It is a confident, intimate, and continuous conversation with a reality that is more present to us than we are to ourselves. Let's now look at the lessons for the present, the inward lesson, polishing the heart's mirror. The practical lesson flows directly from Imam Khomeini's guidance. If yaqeen or certainty is the fruit, dhikr or remembrance is the labor. But we must redefine our understanding of remembrance or dhikr. It is not the robotic tallying of beads or the mindless repetition of words that we don't understand, that we don't reflect on. It is the act of polishing the mirror of the heart. Our lesson is to engage in conscious, prolonged remembrance. So let's look at the practical application. When we set aside time for dhikr, or remembrance, we must bring our full presence. We must understand that with every Ya Allah, O God, or Subhanallah, glory be to God, we are performing the action of polishing. We are actively wiping away the dirt of ghafla or heedlessness or negligence that is settled upon our hearts. What is the goal? The goal is to polish the mirror so relentlessly that, as Imam Khomeini said, the unseen realities must be reflected in it. And the result? When we achieve this, our dua, our supplication changes. We no longer begin our prayer by trying to find God. Because of our constant state of remembrance, we are already in a state of dialogue with Him. Our prayer is simply the continuation of a conversation that never stopped. We move from a state of requesting, or talab, like we said, to a state of witnessing, what we call shuhud. Let's now look at our call to clarify, the outward call, resisting the age of heedlessness. We live in a world that is engineered for ghafla, heedlessness. This is one of the core maladies, if not the core malady of our time. It is a society of the spectacle, a culture of frantic noise, digital distraction, and sensory overload. This entire system is designed for one purpose: to keep us obsessed with the material, with the superficial world, what we call the dunya, and to be completely blind to the unseen, to the amazing unseen, profound realities of the akhirah or the hereafter. It is a system that manufactures doubt and anxiety as its primary products. Our call to clarify is to proclaim that dhikr or remembrance and the yaqeen or certainty that results from it are, in this context, radical acts of resistance. So let's look at the clarification. The person who has achieved yaqeen or certainty, who is in a constant state of dialogue with God, is the sanest, most grounded, and most revolutionary person in an insane and superficial world. Let's look at the transformation. Such a person is no longer a mere consumer, driven by manufactured anxieties. Oh, will I get the latest iPhone? Will I get this? Will I do this? If I don't get this, I'll be left behind. Such a person is now a mu'min, a true believer, driven by profound realities. They are no longer a slave to the spectacle, because their heart is a mirror reflecting the malakut, or the spiritual kingdom. And the conclusion of this? This is why the forces of Taghut, or tyranny, work so hard to fill our eyes and ears with noise, because they fear a society of believers who have yaqeen, who have certainty. A person with yaqeen or certainty cannot be manipulated by fear, greed, propaganda, or anything. They have an unshakable axis. They are, in a word, free. Please give me a salawat, and we move to the third point, which is certainty in action, the weapon of resistance.
اللهم صل على
اللهم
محمد
صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل
محمد
درجهم.
So let's look at the core concept. What does yaqeen do? So now we arrive at the critical final stage. What does yaqeen do when it is put under pressure? How does it function, not just in the peace of our prayer room, but in the chaos and struggle of the world? This is where yaqeen or certainty meets sabr or steadfastness, the key component of Surah al-Asr, the chapter of time, where God says, and this is Surah al-Asr, the chapter of time, 103rd chapter of the Quran, verses 1 to 3. God says, by the time, or by the passage of time, truly humanity is in a state of loss, except those who believe and do righteous deeds and enjoin each other to truth and enjoin each other to patience or steadfastness. The command from the Prophet Muhammad in this regard is precise. He says, call upon God while you are certain of the response. I'll repeat that. Call upon God while you are certain of the response, meaning when you call upon God, be certain of the response. This hadith presents a profound challenge. How can we be certain of the response when we are so aware of our own sins, our own failings, our own unworthiness? How can we be certain when we see injustice in the world and our prayers for its removal seem to go unanswered? The answer is found in the heart-wrenching yet profoundly certain supplications of Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zain al-Abidin, or Imam Sajjad. In his dua of Abu Hamzah al-Thumali, he masters this apparent contradiction. He confesses his own nothingness and sinfulness, yet immediately pivots to an absolute certainty in God's mercy. In dua Abu Hamzah, we have this: my God, I did not disobey you when I disobeyed you as the one who denies your lordship, but it was a sin that befell me, and I was deceived by your veil drawn over me. So now who will save me from your punishment? And I am seeking refuge in you from you, my God. I do not despair of you, for you have opened the door of repentance to me. This is the synthesis. Our yaqeen is not in ourselves. It is not in our deeds, nor is it in our worthiness. Our yaqeen, our certainty, is in him. It is an absolute certainty in his mercy, in his generosity, in his wisdom, precisely at the moment we are most aware of our own failings. We are not certain of our desired outcome at our desired time. Rather, we are certain that he is listening and that his response, whatever it is, and whenever it comes, is the perfect manifestation of his wisdom and his love. Let's now look at our final lesson for the present, the inward lesson. Certainty in mercy, not in deeds. The practical lesson is how we handle the whispers of Satan, especially when our prayers are delayed, God forbid, or when we fall into sin, again, God forbid. So what is the problem? Let's look at the problem. We make a supplication, a dua for something, and it does not happen. Or we commit a sin, and Satan whispers, saying to us, who are you to ask God for anything now? You're a hypocrite. Your connection is cut. Give up. So what is the solution? The yaqeen or certainty of Imam Sajjad is the weapon against this despair. Our lesson is to reject the satanic logic entirely. This is not just a hopeful wish. It is a command based on the very nature of God as introduced to us by Ahlulbayt. Satan's logic is a perversion of justice. It is a cold, merciless, and illusory calculus designed to lead to despair. As Imam Khomeini explains again in his 40 hadith, this is Satan's primary tactic. Imam Khomeini says, and Satan makes the sin appear great in the person's eyes in order to cast that person into despair, what we call yas, of God's mercy. And this despair is higher and more grievous than the sin he or she has committed. We, however, are commanded to argue from the logic of God's true nature, his all-encompassing mercy, or rahmah. We are given the proof of God's true disposition in a profound hadith, again from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, where he says, and this is truly a very interesting and very beautiful hadith. Imam al-Sadiq teaches us, indeed, when a servant repents to God the Most High, he makes his angels forget what they had written against him of sins. And he, again, God, inspires his limbs in the spots of the earth where he sinned, saying, conceal his sins from him. So he meets God the Most High when he meets him, and there is nothing to bear witness against him regarding any of his sins. This is truly profound. This hadith is our weapon. Satan's whispers that the sin is too great and the connection is cut. This is a lie. The truth is that God's mercy actively erases the sin, actively commands the angels to forget it, and orders the very earth to conceal it. Having said that, this should not be seen as an excuse by someone to go away and sin. This is not what I'm saying over here. What I'm saying is when someone is genuinely moving themselves towards God and they fall, they trip up, this is where this applies. Not to some random person who is sinning because they have no cognizance or awareness of God. Let's now look at the practical application. We must cultivate a certainty that is based on his attributes, not on our states. When we feel sinful, we must run towards him faster, with the certainty that his door of repentance is open. When our dua or supplication is not answered in the way that we want, we must have the certainty that a better answer is being formulated, either by a trial being averted, a sin being forgiven, or a greater reward being in store for us. And when I say reward, I don't necessarily mean a transactional thing, but something better being in store for us. We call upon him with the certainty of a beloved child who knows their father or mother is listening, loves them, even if they have misbehaved. And now the final call to clarify, the outward call, certainty as the weapon of resistance. And this brings us to our final and most critical clarification. In the world of geopolitics, oppression, and war, the primary weapon of the oppressor is not the bomb or the missile. It is despair. It is the psychological warfare designed to convince the oppressed that their resistance is futile, that the enemy is too big and too powerful, that God is, God forbid, absent, and that they are alone. This is the ultimate link back to Surah al-Asr. Surah al-Asr being the chapter of the time, 103rd chapter of the Quran, with only 3 verses, where God says, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, by the passage of time, truly humanity is in a state of loss, except those who believe, do righteous deeds, and enjoin each other to truth, and enjoin each other to patience or steadfastness. God states here that mankind is in a state of loss. Humanity is in a state of loss, except for those who enjoin each other to truth and enjoin each other to sabr or patience, steadfastness, resistance. How can a small besieged group enjoin each other to sabr, to patience, when facing a genocidal superpower armed with the most advanced technology on Earth? They cannot do it with material calculations. They can only do it through yaqeen. This is the hidden ideology of the resistance that we spoke of in the previous session. It is the practical, political, and military manifestation of a deeply nurtured spiritual yaqeen or certainty. And we hear this directly from its leaders. The master of the martyrs of the Islamic resistance, said Hassan Nasrallah, may God rest his pure soul, famously said after the 2006 victory, he said, we never doubted the victory because we never doubted God. And of course, the references are all in the write-up. Said Hassan has articulated this yaqeen in other ways, explaining to the resistance fighters that victory is not a possibility, rather it is a destiny. He said, victory was never an option for you. Rather, it is an inevitable destiny written upon your foreheads. The martyred commander, Hajj Qasim Soleimani, may God rest his pure soul, embodied this principle. His strength was not just tactical, it was spiritual. He's reported to have said to some of the fighters, especially when they were fighting Daesh in Syria and Iraq, he said, we are fed by certainty, we are fed by yaqeen, not by salary. This is the conclusion. Their sabr is not a grim, passive endurance. It is a joyful, offensive, and confident resistance. It is born from an unshakable certainty or yaqeen that they are on the side of haqq, the truth, and that God's promise of victory is absolute. This is what makes a small group of believers, armed with certainty, with yaqeen, more powerful than the greatest armies on earth. Their yaqeen, their certainty, this is their weapon. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the conclusion.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So the conclusion, let's look at the journey from doubt to dialogue. In this second part of our journey into the heart of the matter, we have explored the profound station of yaqeen or certainty. We have moved from the foundation of purity to the axis of certainty. And our path was a logical ascent. We first learned that yaqeen is an intellectual achievement, not a blind dogma. It is built on the 4 pillars defined by Imam Ali: insightful discernment, the interpretation of wisdom, admonition born of reflection, and following the path of the righteous ones who came before. Number 2, we then discovered that yaqeen is an internal state of vision. It is the fruit of purifying the heart and polishing it with dhikr or remembrance, real remembrance, a state where, as Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, said, the unseen becomes brighter than the sun. And dua, the supplication, is transformed from a request to a dialogue. Finally, we saw that yaqeen is both a defensive and proactive weapon. It is the weapon against Satan's whisper of despair, allowing us to be certain of God's mercy, even when we are aware of our sins. And it is the weapon of the resistance, providing the unshakable steadfastness of sabr that makes believers as said Hassan, may God rest his pure soul, said, an inevitable destiny. Victory being an inevitable destiny. As we leave this session, let us take 3 practical lessons away with us. Firstly, build your certainty. Dedicate time this week to one of the 4 pillars. Don't just read the Quran. Pick one verse and reflect on it. Pillar 3. Do not just hear the news. Interpret its deeper wisdom. Pillar 2. Actively build your faith. Second point, transform your remembrance. The next time you perform dhikr, do not just count the beads. Feel the act. With each time you say Subhanallah, glory be to God, intend that you are polishing the very mirror of your heart, wiping away that film of heedlessness, preparing it to reflect the light of the unseen. And thirdly, wield certainty against despair. The next time you, God forbid, sin, and Satan whispers, you are cut off, reject his illusory lies wrapped as logic. Remind yourself of Imam al-Sadiq's hadith, that God's mercy erases the record. Your certainty in his mercy is in his mercy, not in your merit. We now have a purified vessel, and we have filled it with the light of certainty. But this vessel, our body, and this light, our soul, require fuel to be sustained in the world. Join us for the 3rd part of this series within a series, where we will explore the final and perhaps most practical prerequisite, the fuel for the heart, known as rizq halal, righteous sustenance, the vital role of lawful and pure sustenance in keeping the mirror of the heart polished and the light of certainty burning bright. Please give me a loud salawat, and we move to the Whisper Beneath the Throne segment, which is a supplication connected to the session today. It is today titled A Whisper for the Light of Certainty.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. O God, send your blessings upon Muhammad, your chosen beloved, and upon his family, the ark of our salvation. My God, I am the one who was mired in sin. I am the one who was lost in the fog of my own doubt. My heart was a mirror, but it was caked in the rust of my transgressions and the dirt of my heedlessness. I would call, but I was not certain. I would ask, but I did not know how to listen. I lived in a world of shadows and mistook them for reality. Then, my Lord, you enveloped me in your profound love, and you showed me the signs of your truth. I saw you in the mercy of your saints, in the hadith of your Imam al-Sadiq, who promised that you command the very angels to forget my sins, that you order the earth to conceal my shame. I was certain of my sin, but you taught me to be more certain of your mercy. I saw you in the steadfastness of the resistance, in the eyes of a fighter whose patience, whose sabr, is not grim endurance, but rather joyful, proactive, and defensive weaponry. I heard you in the voice of your servant who said, we are fed by certainty, not by salary. And I knew that yaqeen was the true sustenance. I saw you, my Lord, my God, in the eyes of the children of Gaza, in the tears of a father holding his martyred child, who looks to the camera not with despair, but with a defiant certainty and says, sufficient for us is God. I saw you, my God, in the eyes of the martyr Yahya Sinwar, who with his last breath was always defiant against the enemy and entirely certain in your assistance. The yaqeen of these people exposed the lie of the entire world. Their steadfastness shattered my illusions. Their poverty revealed my own. O God, O you, the light upon light, I am the one who was mired in sin. and now I am the one who is mired in your love. Grant me, I beg you, a portion of this certainty. Grant me the intellectual strength to build its pillars, the spiritual purity to polish its mirror, and the defiant courage to wield it as a weapon. Make my yaqeen, my certainty, the axis of my soul, so that my dua becomes a dialogue with you. My sabr becomes a resistance in your way, and my life and my death become entirely for you. Oh my God, I pledge to you, and I pledge to the Imam of my time, that I will strive to live by this certainty. I will enjoin it, and I will defend it. I will build my faith with knowledge, and I will fight despair with your mercy. O God, bless Muhammad and his family, and hasten the return of our master, the awaited one, Imam al-Mahdi. May our souls be his ransom. Make us worthy of his sight. Make us the dirt underneath his feet. Make our certainty, our yaqeen, the foundation upon which his government of justice is built. By your mercy, O the most merciful of the merciful. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. وآخر الدعوان عن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.